Arrancamos. Anthony from the neighborhood en Latino Mixx. Dale play a tu bocina.
Bienvenidos, señores. Aquí estamos sábado a las 11 de la mañana aquí en su programa favorito, From the Neighborhood, your favorite program here where you get to know your neighborhood. This is the program where we're going to debunk what the headlines have to say, what the news has to say about certain areas, and bring out those surprising individuals that are living right next door. Esas personas que están al lado de ustedes, que están trayendo las historias muy interesantes, las cosas que se están haciendo en su vecindario, cómo están creciendo, cómo están evolucionando, no solamente ellos mismos, pero el impacto que tienen en su comunidad. That impact they have in the community, this is what's up, because these guys are right next door. They are your neighborhood. So everybody who's coming on the program is from the neighborhood. Some neighborhood, the one it is today, well, guess what? My guy comes out of Brooklyn, but he didn't start in Brooklyn. So if you guys are from Brooklyn, make sure to stand up to represent how our borough has created another phenomenal citizen here in our world who's changing things. And this is going to be really, really exciting. So with that, I invite you, lo invito a ustedes, que si tienen una buena historia y son de un vecindario, la quieren contar aquí en nuestro programa, asegúrese de comunicarse conmigo en cualquier de las redes sociales, From the Neighborhood. Y aquí, Latino Mixx, usted se puede comunicar conmigo y dejarme saber cuál es tu historia. Tell me, what's your story? Get on social media platforms. From the Neighborhood, reach out to me and tell me, hey, Anthony, I got a great story to tell you. This is what I'm doing. Here's how I'm changing things. Here's the struggles. Here's the sweat that I went through. And then here's what I'm making. Here's what I'm creating. Here's how I represent my neighborhood. And if you love representing your neighborhood, make sure to check out our store. The merch store has got some cool stuff. We're representing all sorts of neighborhoods in our store. So make sure to pick it up at fromtheneighborhood.com. Guys, we got a great show. As I mentioned, my guys here from Brooklyn, there's going to be amazing things happening. And as we're putting out more locals, more neighborhoods, more cities, more places, if you've got a business and you want to advertise, we've got a package for you. So make sure to join us here at Latino Mixx. Our whole team will help you with getting your business out there and letting them know that it is from the neighborhood. Ya ustedes saben, para que conozcan quién es tu negocio, dónde están ustedes con la comunidad, consíguenos aquí, Latino Mixx, para que nosotros podamos promocionar su negocio y ayudarla a crecer. So with that, folks, I'm going to go to a quick break. You know, as always, we got a great, great show. And I'm going to give you one more hint. My guy here is changing what it's like to live wherever you are. So we're talking a lot of cities, folks. We're talking a lot of places you can live in. And this guy's changing it. So if you guys didn't wake up this morning, well, guess what? I'm going to ring your doorbell, your alarm bell. I'm going to rock the bells with this jam from LL Cool J. Let's go.
De regreso con Anthony from the neighborhood.
Bienvenidos de nuevo. Welcome back, guys. And here we are with an amazing show as we've had for many, many weeks. As you know, guys, we're really, really looking through these neighborhoods to try to find who are those amazing people in these programs. And here we are. We're going back to Brooklyn, and I got so many great things that come out of Brooklyn. And I've got a great guest. As I mentioned before, this gentleman here is developing something super cool that I think is definitely needed. I mean, there's so many places that we can live, and it's so hard to figure out what is the right, perfect place. How do I feel at home? ¿Cómo me siento yo en casa cuando estoy en tantos diferentes lugares y no sé de qué es lo que es bueno en tal lugar comparado a otro? So este señor es joven. Él está creando una buena plataforma. I'm not going to say too much about what it is doing, but I just want you to get his origins. Quiero que tú conoces su historia. Get the background. Because a lot of times we see these folks and we're like, wow, these guys are amazing. Look at the stuff that they're accomplishing. And we're wondering, what did they do? They jumped on a magic train? ¿Cómo fue que llegaron a ese lugar? ¿Qué fue la bendición de Dios que llegó? ¿Cuáles fueron las barreras que se le abrieron? ¿La puerta que se le abrieron? ¿Quién le dio la mano? We don't know. But let me tell you something. If this person right here is in front of us, human being just like you and me, we're breathing air, then they had challenges too. And if they had challenges and they made it, well, then let's get behind the doors and find out the secret. Like I said, we're busting through the headlines on these neighborhoods. And if he's from a neighborhood where you currently live, this might be an inspiration for you to start developing what your purpose in life is, what your vision is, and creating that change you want to see. So with that, folks, I'm going to introduce my guest here with no further ado. This gentleman here has had many accomplishments we're going to talk about on the show. Welcome to the show, Ofo Ezeugwu. How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. You got the name and everything.
Thank you, brother. Hey, man, listen, big round of applause for my man right here. This guy right here is doing amazing stuff. And I really, really am glad that you're on the program here because you're a young guy and you bounced around from a few places.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
But Brooklyn really, I feel like, keeps coming up. It's the denominator, right?
Last 10 years of life. Yeah. Yeah.
Listen, I throw a big round of applause for your work, your accomplishments, the borough you're from. I really would love to see or have the viewers, have the listeners, because you guys can watch us on LatinoMixx.com. You guys can also be listening to us. I want you guys to really catch up on this guy's story. So let's go right back to, first of all, let me start right now with how old you are, because I want people to realize that, age is just a number, right?
Yeah, for
How
sure.
old are you right now?
I'm 30 years old. I'm a March baby, so it's Pisces season over here. So 30 for a couple more weeks.
30 is going to be this guy's age right here. He's the benchmark, but a lot of people say, life changes at 30. Things get flipped upside down, and I just don't feel the same at 30. But here you are at 30, and I'm just going to let this cat right out the bag. Forbes 30 under 30.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Recognized by Forbes for stuff you're doing, and we're going to get to that. But you open up your eyes to two parents who were already, in my opinion, very successful.
Agreed.
Right?
Agreed.
And, but, to you were like, I want to do something different. So let's go back to your parents here. Yep. Talk to me a little bit about them. They have an interesting story of how they met.
They do. So my dad moved to the United States of America when he was 18 years old from Nigeria, Nsukka. And first person in his family to get to America. And my mom moved from Barbados when she was 11. My grandmother on my mom's side worked as a domestic for 4 years, saved up money and sent for her kids from Barbados. But look, even my grandfather owned a brownstone. He bought it in 1964 in Bed-Stuy, right? So and he's on my Bayesian side too. So there's so many cross stories here. But parents ended up meeting in Niagara Falls at Niagara University. Yeah. And my mom was coming at that point from Flatbush because she had been there for about 8 years.
This is where Brooklyn comes into the story, folks.
Yep.
Right here is Brooklyn. You hear that? So your mom's over from Flatbush, but she came from Barbados.
Yep.
And your father was from Nigeria.
Yep.
But then they end up meeting somewhere here in New York, and you would think New York City, right? The melting pot of everything. But where did they meet?
Well, that's the funny thing is, I remember my dad, when he first came from Nigeria, he had to, connect in at JFK. Mm-hmm. And he was he said he looked out the plane and saw trees, and he was like, we are in the wrong place now. Right, but eventually made it to Buffalo.
Is that how your father sounds?
That's exactly how he sounds.
Yeah, Daddy, you heard that? he imitated you on the radio. So he said, "We're in the wrong place now."
We're in the wrong place. He didn't believe it, and it's crazy because there's still TV and stuff, but in his mind it was he's like it kind of was the land of milk and honey, right? That's how America was presented or pitched, right? Golden roads,
right?
So when he thought about New York City, he thought about buildings and infrastructure,
right?
So the idea of a central park, in theory, it's there's a park in the middle of the city,
right?
The parks are all over the city, right? Different boroughs, but from a plains perspective, he's like, we're in the wrong spot.
We're in the wrong place. Yeah. I definitely would love to catch up a lot of the listeners because this is your father coming from Nigeria. Señores, él vino de un país en África y nosotros sabemos que nosotros vinimos de muchos países de Latinoamérica, siendo latino, escuchando la estación, lo que hablan español y saben que los padres llegaron de allá o tal vez usted mismo llegó de allá y no se le apareció lo que ellos pensaban. Right? The land of milk and honey. It didn't show up that way. That's the way he thought. He sees it. He's like, I must be in the wrong place. The gold roads. I got to tell you, my family in the Dominican Republic would hear the same thing. And we travel back to the Dominican Republic. They're like, oh, you guys are all rich. You guys have everything, And we'd be like, no, I'm actually giving you all the sneakers that I have.
Right.
I'm going home naked.
Yeah. No, that's real. That's real. That resonates with me a lot because I think that there was even as Facebook was starting to become a thing, I would get so many messages from family and then friends of family and then friends of family who would act like their family and they'd be asking for this, that, and the other. And the thing is my parents have become very successful in their lives from how they work, right? And I was mentioning to you off site here, you go from being in a studio apartment in Paterson, New Jersey. It's not the prettiest neighborhood in New Jersey. I promise you that, right? But through a bunch of different moves, you eventually get to the suburbs. And the thing about my family is even while my dad's a doctor, my mom's a nurse, my pop still pushes a 15-year-old Toyota Highlander. Right, that's just his makeup. He doesn't need the Hummer. He doesn't need this. My mom still drives a minivan.
So your mom is and your dad, despite their achievements, they're both in the medical field. Los padres de ellos se aplicaron y estudiaron, llegaron aquí para lograr sus metas. They became medical professionals. Yeah. They still decided, you know what, we're humble people. We can't splurge. We've got people depending on us back home.
Yeah, and I think when you're a kid, especially growing up in America, it's easy to do the comparison thing. You're looking at other people's families, and you know, kid pushing like a Benz in high school. You're like, how's that happen, right? Like pushing a stark blue Nissan Sentra. That was my sister's hand-me-down, right? Like she was going to school, so I got to use it. So you can do that, or you can realize, wait, like there's like hundreds, if not thousands of people depending on these two people.
Do you think that was a really big influence in your life, you know, having that comparison and contrast, viendo lo que es la vida en otro país a lo que es comparado aquí en los Estados Unidos, seeing that, did you think that really caused something where you said to yourself, I'm lucky, you know, I really got it good, depending where you are, right? Because even if you were in Paterson, New Jersey, it still was better than what you were seeing in some cases back home.
1,000%. Like I was blessed to have two parents that love me a lot, right? Love all my siblings a lot. So, you know, it's interesting. I said the word comparison, but I found early that I wasn't comparing more than I was observing, right? So I can observe differences. I can observe the idea of relativity. And I don't ever want to be in the world of comparing, because at the end of the day, like I said this to my girl all the time, like you can look at LeBron James and be like, yo, people say, well, you know, you'd kill to be in his shoes. And I'm like, I wouldn't, because the reality is like the things he's experienced growing up, right? You know, single mom, dad comes back in his life when he's made money. So what does it look like for you as a child to internalize the fact that your parents only willing to engage with you when you're giving them something other than you?
Wow.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting. And besides, his shoe size is probably really, really big.
Pretty big,
so,
right?
You know, everybody has a shoe that fits them appropriately to their life.
That's
and I think, you know, if you have, for example, let's just say a condition in your life, you know, it's going to shape you differently. And honestly, if we're going to stick with that comparison or metaphor, you know, you're set to walk a different path
1,000%.
because it's your own set of shoes. Now, your parents, they took a path of medicine. They have come from different worlds. You chose to take a different path, which we're going to get to. But I love the fact that you said you were observing. Estuvo observando lo que es la vida fuera en otro lugar y también aquí en los Estados Unidos, y viendo que él lo tuvo bien aquí, no importa lo difícil que sea, because you were in Paterson, New Jersey. You said it was really rough living conditions. Describe to me some of the things that you felt that, yeah, they're rough here, right? Where comparison could probably be dangerous, right? Because you would say, oh, look at where we live. But in your observations, it almost formed like some sort of gratitude, right? For what your parents had done. Describe to me, Paterson, when you were living there, what was it that really made it feel tough?
So what's funny is I was a little kid when I was there. Like I'm talking 0 to 3 is my time in New Jersey. All I really have to go through is, one, my brother lived there for most of his life. His that's where he grew up. We have different moms. I'd visit. So for me, Paterson, more from a story perspective, from my parents talking about their experiences working at St. Joe's Hospital, stuff like that. Like, you know, it just so happened my mom's best friend in college at Niagara ended up being born in St. Joe's Hospital as well. Like me and my siblings, those random connections, but realizing the story of how we started in a studio apartment there, splitting the living room and the kitchen with the curtain, to you live in an apartment in Clifton, to you live in an apartment in Buffalo.
Hold on a second.
Right?
You split the living room and the kitchen with a curtain. Señores, ellos dividían los cuartos con una cortina. You divided the rooms with a curtain, and now are you sharing this studio apartment with another family?
Nah, it's 5 of us, you know, and my brother's a 6, right? But he was with his mom. So you're talking about 5 people in a small space. But we, you know, we grew with our parents. Like me and my siblings talk about that all the time. Like we literally grew with them. So I don't know what it's like to live in the suburbs my whole life. I don't know what it's like to live upper middle class or to be rich. What I do know is that I've observed the steps. I've observed what it looks like to go from like you're literally sparking pennies together to make it happen to it's like, nah, like dinner is assumed you're going to have it. Like, you know, why wouldn't you, right? So I was talking to my older sister last night about this. Like, in reality, if I look back at my life, the biggest blessing isn't even money or anything. It's just my parents never gave me a reason to worry as a kid.
Wow, because they work so hard at being parents.
They work so hard at being parents, at being partners first, at showing up for us. Like they couldn't be at every basketball game, but their spirit was there.
Right.
You know, like my mom would load us up in the minivan, and it was taekwondo, it was dance, it was basketball. it was gymnastics. It was like your flavor of the month. We were
right.
like, and
but you couldn't stay inside of a studio, whether you were 0 to 3 years old, or maybe, I don't know how conditions were in Buffalo and in other places you lived, but you couldn't stay cooped up in one place. I mean, not for nothing, but Buffalo's pretty cold. Niagara Falls is pretty cold. I mean, we've in the short time we've been on here, señores, nosotros hemos hablado de varias ciudades y lugares y países. We've talked about a lot of places.
Yeah.
You've been around.
Yeah.
You've been around.
Yeah.
Your parents then said, you know what? We've been around, but we're staying in these small places. I got to take you around.
Right.
Taekwondo, baseball, and all these other places. I mean, they really had to kind of expose you to what was out there. And I got to say, like, maybe you haven't been around the world, but you did tell me you went to Nigeria several times.
Yeah.
You went to Barbados several times. About how many times did you go there, and how old were you?
Yeah, so Barbados 3 times, and then Nigeria 10 times.
10 times.
Age, you're talking about from 3-ish years old all the way to the last maybe 2 years ago going to Nigeria. So
Wow.
my whole life, I've been blessed enough to just be able to get out there.
Yeah.
You talk about like just how it creates even like the diversity of thought and just being in all these different places. But for me, even like, man, like by the time I was in middle and high school, my schools in Ellicott City, Maryland were mostly white and Korean, right? And the thing was though, so I was schooling in spaces that were white and Korean, mostly white, but all my extracurriculars. So when I'm talking about basketball, when I'm talking about taekwondo, when I'm talking about dance, and all that was in Baltimore. That's black people.
Baltimore is completely different.
Right. So there was like this I think positive tension of like, who are you in these spaces, right? When you're around the black kids, do you try to, big air quotes, act more black? When you're around the white kids, do you try to act more white? Right? It's like
the conversation of identity becomes a thing. Yeah.
Right. But for me, I was in high school wearing a 4X South Pole shirt, giving presentations and stuff, and my name was Ofo Ezeugwu. It just, none of it made sense to anybody.
No,
and that's what made it.
When you went to Nigeria,
sense.
when you went to Barbados, I mean, you just mentioned your name there.
Yeah.
Cuando uno está en su país, alguna vez uno se siente fuera de su país. Like, I go back to the Dominican Republic, being a Dominican born here in America, and they'll tell me I'm not Dominican. If some people are really rooted into that, and I think that's an identity thing, right? It's what you choose. And at the end of the day, like, you have your name. You just said Ofo.
Yeah.
You go to Nigeria. Are you Ofo in Nigeria? Or are you Ofo in Barbados? Or are you like, what is this in either place?
Yo, when I was in Nigeria, I remember going there, I was probably like 12, 13 years old. And this little baby is like pointing over his father's shoulder and saying something to me in Igbo, and I couldn't understand it. And my cousin starts laughing. And he's like, yo, you know what he's saying? I'm like, what? He's like, white boy. Right? Like,
wow.
like, so it's like, it doesn't, I could be in Barbados and you couldn't be Bayesian enough. I could be in Nigeria, not Nigerian enough. I could be in Baltimore, not black enough. I could be in Ellicott City, not white enough, right?
Wow.
I didn't want to be enough for anybody. I just wanted to be myself.
Do you think that if we had the opportunity to take planes, to visit each other, to really get past the noise and constructs of man, that it would make us closer to each other?
1,000%.
Yeah.
Like I always say, like if you took if you took the poor kid in insert town of Nigeria and put them in Baltimore for a day and switch, so put the kid from Baltimore in one of the rural kind of poor areas of Nigeria and you had them experience each other's lives, right? If you're the kid from Nigeria, you're looking around like, yo, this is not safe. This is not like this. I don't know gun violence like this. You know it in a civil context. I don't negate that.
Yeah.
But I don't know the idea of effectively my own neighborhood, like not really having my best interests at heart. That's a very interesting perspective.
Yeah.
If you're the kid from Baltimore and you're out in Nigeria, you're like, yo, like I was guaranteed a roof over there, right? Like
Very
I was
different.
guaranteed
Yeah.
food over there.
Yeah.
Like this is some different stuff, right?
Now they would meet a Nigerian
now they would
here.
appreciate
They would appreciate each other, right? Exactly.
Right.
And I think what really lacks here is having been around the world.
Sure.
And I think having been around the world authentically.
Yeah.
I got to go to a quick break here, and that's actually going to lead me to my next song here, and a tribute, obviously, to Brooklyn, but my man's from Harlem, so either way, he loved Bed-Stuy and my man Biggie and all that stuff. So Puff Daddy, I'm gonna take it right back to Been Around the World. Let's go.
De regreso con Anthony from the Neighborhood.
Welcome back, and we have felt like we've been around the world, and it's some really deep conversation there, Ofo. I got to really give credit to the fact that we're both jiving on this here. I'm going to catch up the folks real quick, señores. Si ustedes se han perdido lo que ha pasado, nosotros estamos hablando de la observación de cómo es vivir en un lugar comparado a otro, o simplemente no compararlo, observar lo que tú tienes ahora enfrente de ti y agradecerlo, porque la vida no es lo mismo en otro lugar. Y aunque nosotros estemos aquí, hay otro que puede estar a cruzar la calle de usted y la puede estar pasando difícil. Así que hay que agradecer el tiempo que uno tiene aquí, con la vida de uno lleva y las personas con quien uno la comparte. There's really a lot of appreciation you got to have for where you are. Because I was just saying, someone across the street could be going through some major challenges, you know, and maybe living in conditions that are subpar compared to you. And you're right across the street from them, but we don't know, because I feel like that connectivity there is broken apart because we're just simply not that exposed. Right. You know, it's almost like we're stuck inside ourselves all the time, right? With what we have to do, how we feel, and what we think is right or wrong, and we don't really consider the other or observe the other, right? And now, something you told me which is interesting, this was off the air, and I really want to bring it back. In part of the observation, Nigeria, 10 times. Ha ido a África 10 veces. Barbados, 3 times. Ha ido a Barbados 3 veces. And a lot of people think Barbados, they think vacation. But when you were going there, you mentioned something to me off air about taking a shower. Vamos a hablar de cómo que se bañaba en esos países. How did you take a shower in these places where you went to visit?
Yeah, I mean, Barbados, I think, mostly had more running water, so that wasn't as big of a problem there. But definitely had family from this, like the more rural inland parts of Barbados. But Nigeria, we were taking showers with buckets. Right. And look, man, I was doing that even a couple years ago back in Nigeria. Like, you know, when the water runs, you kind of rejoice. It's like, this is cool, but you're expecting it not to be. Yeah. So you boil the water till it's hot. You mix it with a little cool water, and then everyone takes a turn going in there, and you use the bucket.
Take your bucket inside, and then just grab whatever it is, a cup or a can, and start dipping it on yourself.
Exactly.
Now, this is not to knock Nigeria. This is just saying, like, this is, you know, the way of life sometimes. Like I said, it could be your neighbor right across the street from where you live here in the United States that's having to take a shower this way because that's just what they have, right? That's just what's available. But this observation opened you up to, like, things of how do you live?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest part of it is that I would realize as a kid, that could be your lifestyle and you could still be very happy.
Yeah.
So you start to question early, like, what exactly is happiness rooted in? Is it rooted in the stuff that you hoard and have? Or is it rooted in, like, me being able to chop it up with you, right? Yeah. In this kind of environment.
Correct.
Us being able to crack open a Star beer, right? That's Nigeria's beer, right? And just, like, talk about life, right? Or palm wine, right? So shout out to my Nigerians out there. Like, that's what brought happiness. They're always ranked in the top, like, 10, 15 nations in happiness.
And one of the richest countries of Africa.
Yeah, the richest black nation on the planet.
Wow. Yeah. Big shout out to Nigeria and all the folks who are making their country stand out. And Nigeria has a very interesting history. You told me some of that off the air. I'm just super curious about it. Even just how it got its name.
Sure.
Right? Sure. How did the name, el nombre de Nigeria, si ustedes no están educados en esto, señores, pongan mucha atención de cómo llegan el origen de nombres en algunos lugares. The origin of its name, tell me.
Yeah, so, you know, where colonialism was a thing that's happened really now across the world, right? So a lot of Hispanic nations are privy to it the same way a lot of African nations are. But if you think about, like, Australia, the idea or premise around it was sending effectively the knucklehead white folks to Australia, away from Europe and these kind of places. Well, same thing in Africa. The tribes that were the most unruly, they couldn't get to conform to slavery, things like that. They were sending to the Niger River Delta or Niger River, the Niger River area, right? So Niger area is like Nigeria, right? Yeah. So it's even now, a lot of times you'll see turmoil on the news, but you're like, these are folks that never lived together, right? But in the last 80 to 100 years, they've been put together.
Correct.
80 plus different dialects spoken. The main language is English. Well, that doesn't make sense. Yeah. But if you go around Africa, you see a lot of places the main language is French or the main language is Dutch.
It's an imported language.
Exactly.
At which point people are still trying to discover the language, plus discover themselves.
Absolutely.
And each other communication styles. Because they also have their own different customs, right? Maybe different tribes. So it's so interesting. And I bring this up because you're a person who's you know, essentially building community, you know, and you know, these are struggles we go through in life. Son cosas que te echan para atrás. You think like, oh, this doesn't exist, but these are things that set you back in life, where you find like someone who you're trying to speak to, you're saying, but they don't get me.
Right.
And it's not because they don't want to get you. I think people want to avoid conflict as much as possible. No one really wants to go ahead and risk their lives or risk their reputation just because I can't get my message across.
Right.
But at the same time, we have the same power and sort of possessive energy to be heard.
Right.
Right. So it's like that good, meaning our power of communication, can actually become an evil when we're so, misunderstood. Right. And finding ourselves in this kind of place, it makes it difficult. And now the reason I'm bringing it back is because what you're doing, and we haven't even gotten into it, Señora, lo que él está haciendo no lo hemos hablado, but what you're doing puts you in a place where you have people of different communication styles, different types of identities, different classes, essentially, and I myself, I washed with the bucket just like you, boil it up. I remember pulling it out of a steel drum and then taking it to the stove and warming it up, right? Because it was a cold night in the Caribbean. I remember that. But when I would come here, nobody would understand it, right? I was not American enough. But in Dominican Republic, I was soft. Oh, you got running water, right? It's crazy. But so you're in this kind of place right now, but to get there, you had to go through a lot of work, and you didn't decide to follow your parents' path.
Right. I mean, just to bring it to that point, I remember this is like 5 or so years ago. I'm wearing this beaded necklace, and the way the beaded necklace is built, it's actually historically a Yoruba chain, but it's like women would put it around their waist, like hip beads or waist beads. And I just liked how it looked around my neck. So I was wearing it one time, and my cousin stopped. I was in Nigeria. He stopped me. He was like, "Yo, that's for women. Like they wear that around their waist." And I was like, "Yeah, but I like it around my neck." And he was like, "That's so cool, man. That's so," because it's just like you start realizing there's all these boxes that you conform to, and it's like, but for why, right? I saw a meme today, and it showed the image of a conformed mind versus a growth mind, and it took 4 puzzle pieces, and they fit perfectly together, but it was an even square around, and that was the conformed mind.
Right.
The other version of the growth mind was the puzzle pieces were all, jagged on all the sides, but they fit together in the middle, but each side had another hook out. It wasn't done. Right. So that's how I think about life a lot, even into what we've built with WYL. It's what does it look like to your point, take a bunch of different perspectives and make them make sense to each other?
Was that easy for you when you decided to go on this version, this path? Was it easy for you to try to get people to see things in the way you wanted it to be seen?
Getting people to see things the way you want them to be seen is never an easy task. But I think everyone could understand, I'm meeting you with empathy, right? If I can put myself, so give another example. You mentioned the different worlds we live in, and somebody could be across the street. When I was in college, I was living in North Philly at Temple in Philadelphia, right? And I remember I was talking to my roommates, and I'd say, we're living in this townhouse being rented out to us as students, right? 4 guys. Next door, you have no idea what folks are going through because they're not going to Temple. So when they're in this neighborhood, sometimes it's a trap. But I'm looking at this neighborhood as an opportunity. Those are 2 different mindsets to walk in and out your house every day with.
Wow, señores, mira las 2 mentalidades que acabo de mencionar. Una trampa, o sea, encerrado, o que la vida es una oportunidad. Y él vio como que esto es una oportunidad, conocer lo que está ocurriendo entre los hogares de otras personas. So you saw this as an opportunity to get to know what's going on behind these closed doors.
For sure. For sure. And so look, I would hear, so I was the VP of the student body my senior year at Temple University. And when I would talk to students, I thought their issues would be mostly school oriented.
Yeah.
I'd argue 70 to 75% of them were actually about housing around the university. Because you have this school that's now 40,000 students strong in North Philly. It was not that. It used to be a commuter school, So when you infuse that much change and now that much power, right? Temple is an institution. This isn't a few people with the regular school. This is an institution.
Yeah.
So that much change causes a lot of friction. And, whether it was landlords harassing female residents, whether it was infestation issues, there was so many problems. And I was like, well, at the very least, what if there was more transparency in the search for housing?
Well, it's like your situation where you said with Nigeria, it's like taking a bunch of people who never really lived together,
right,
squashing them to live together, right? Because they're all trying to get water from the same watering hole, right? This fountain of education, and you've got landlords on one side, you've got tenants on the other side, and they're just like, hey, listen, we've got to all be here because of this school.
Right.
We all want to get, water from this hole.
Right.
Señor, estamos hablando de lo que él estaba creyendo y el trabajo que él estaba haciendo para crear eso y los 2 mundos que él estaba combinando. So 2 crazy worlds that you were finding yourself in. You're right in the middle. Yeah. How much did you fight? How much did you grind to get it out?
Honestly, man, it's such a loaded question to me, only because there's been so many fights, right? Whether it's been the fight for funding, whether it's been the fight for being taken seriously.
Right, because you're just hitting 30. And it's like, who's going to believe you? 20-something years old. What do you even know about owning a house, right?
Absolutely.
Who's believing you?
Absolutely. And so, and you don't realize people are sometimes just assessing, like, how long are you really going to stick with this? Yeah. Maybe we could wait them out. I've been sued by a landlord that was not happy with the reviews they had online.
Wow.
What it turned into, though, was everybody coming out and saying they've been a slumlord for forever, including his partners at like their landlord association. Right. So I was 21 when that happened, 22. You know what I mean? So, but I had been fortunate enough to talk to a mentor who had mentioned to me, hey, the moment you're getting sued, you're doing something right. You're changing something, right? Yes. People don't like change. So if I didn't have that conversation maybe a year or so before, I might have been like, pardon the language, but shitting bricks. 22 years old with a lawsuit in front of me, right?
I think it's worthy trouble to be in because you're doing it for a noble cause. I got to say, listen, we just tapped on it. We've got so much more to cover, but I got to give you my, hats off, applaud, because seriously, you've been grinding. You've been grinding. And I'm going to go quick break here. We're going to jump right back into this here. Let's go with Clips Grinding.
De regreso con Anthony from the neighborhood.
Yeah, that's right. We're grinding. And this is my man, Ofo here. Ofo, you said you did the beat in the school?
Man, that wasn't me. I watched the other kids do it and I cheer them on.
That song, I think, had everybody banging on the desktop.
Yep.
Right? It was like the thing, right?
Absolutely.
Man, big shout out to Clips, man. That was like the jam. And I got to say that you were grinding. And you said that like at 21, you're getting lawsuits and you're thinking to yourself like, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Like, did that really put in a doubt to the point where you were like scared to, I'm in the wrong place? What do you think?
Nah, it just made me go harder. Like, around the same age, a landlord had like threatened me like physically and like, showed up on campus, and it was kind of crazy. Yeah. So that was even earlier, right? So to me, you're seeing grown ass men like lose their composure. Yeah. And I was like, there's something to this, because if you're, and what I would learn in talking to the landlord association that one of those landlords was they were like, well, the reason why he's chirping the loudest is because he's the worst of all of us. Wow. Right. Like, and so we're actually happy he's being called out, because otherwise we're good. The guy had owned more property than most of them. So they're losing out revenue opportunities to a guy who they knew.
Because you called them out. But you know what I really want to call out? I really want to call out what's on your shirt. So folks, if you guys have been watching here on Latino Mixx, you guys have been watching it on there. You guys have been looking at it. He has something on his shirt. His shirt says WYL. Now, it is not a competing station. No es una estación de competencia, WW, que si yo qué. It's not some station. It is actually your brand. Why don't we just shout it out? What do those three letters stand for?
Yeah, WYL stands for Who's Your Landlord.
So that you called out who's the landlord who was not really performing that time, and you got almost into a physical altercation. And this is scary, right? This is scary. You're exposing something. And I got to give a big shout out, because your company is becoming, if you want to compare it to something, and you tell me if I'm off beat. Yeah. But it's like we're taking a Yelp, a Zagat sort of thing where you see what's your restaurant like or what's the store like, to living in place and saying, what's it like to live there? My apartment, my house. What am I renting, right?
Absolutely. It's like, how do you put yourself in a position to rent from someone you can trust? Right. And so for us, it's like, you think of Zagat, you think of Yelp, you think of TripAdvisor, you see those decals in the front of those restaurants, but that's a frequent purchase. Maybe at most, maybe let's say you're really splurging, you go for a $300 dinner, but that's probably the most you're going to spend.
And it's not a long-term relationship. You're not seeing this person month after month after month. Truthfully, like, you kind of enter into like a real dating scenario with 30
your tenant. 60% of your income going to this purchase every year, right? The dynamics are different. So what we even knew was just asking you, generally speaking, fill out this comment box and give some stars. It wasn't really accurate. It's like my fridge could break, my groceries could go bad, I could be really annoyed. Yeah. Now you're my landlord, I go on and give you a 1-star review on Google. Well, is that really my full experience? I'm on a 2-year lease, right? So what we did was, instead we catered the entire process, the reviews, the questions, the surveys, all around your actual experience, right? From lease term starting to lease term ending. And now we had better insights on like management and how they were treating the residents, the unit condition, the living experience and environment. Those are the things that residents care about, the same way owners and operators, or who we call home providers, care
Absolutely.
about.
Yeah, you're giving a voice to those who are unheard. There's a lot of also well-performing landlords
Absolutely.
who are really keeping up with their property that are just not getting the love and the light. And essentially, you have some parts of the community that might even get the bad name where they're like, oh, you don't want to live there. That area is like this. Well, because maybe 5 of the properties on that block are owned by one person who doesn't do a good job,
Exactly.
who might need to know where they're failing, because this isn't about beating people up. Your goal here is to, hey, let me tell you where you can do better.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So essentially, in a sense, you improve a community.
Absolutely.
By just improving people's either living experience there or management experience in handling things better.
Right. I mean, and think of folks that are like just digital natives. You're not even eating at a place unless it's on Yelp or something where you can see reviews, right? Or your friend vouched for it.
My
right?
wife's kitchen is pretty good.
Right.
I eat at my wife's kitchen.
Well, that's love. That's love, right?
That's got the best Yelp review.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And so what does the world look like when you walk around and you see buildings and they have a decal in front and you can tell they're a very good home provider, right? What does it look like? We want a world where you're almost like, why aren't you on WYL?
Very interesting. Yeah.
Right? Because
yeah.
that flips it on its head. It's like we say it's centering humanity at the heart of housing. There's a human in those 4 walls, right?
Yeah.
But we use terms like landlord, right? The idea of lording over land. That's medieval. Property manager, the idea of managing a property. But last time I checked, someone lives in that property.
Yeah.
So if we're not bringing it back to the human, the resident, we're missing the mark. And that's what we really are focused on doing at WYL.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. And it's not even like a hospitality thing. It's more like, just a humanity thing.
Humanity, dignity,
Yeah.
respect.
And you find this this Forbes 30 under 30, by the way.
Yeah.
I want to go back to this because you find Forbes 30 under 30 to not be your biggest accomplishment. Señores, ese no es lo que cumplió. Eso no fue lo más grande que cumplió. Esta plataforma y todo lo que está haciendo no fue lo más grande que cumplió. You guys are in over 400 cities. Señor, tiene 30 años. Está llegando a 400 ciudades. Imagínense cuántos apartamentos y cuántos lugares están bajo su plataforma y están siendo verificados, right? All these are verified reviews. Now, this isn't your biggest accomplishment. Forbes 30 under 30. Señores, la revista Forbes, y no es lo que cumplió. What's your biggest accomplishment? What are you most proud about?
Yeah, and the reason why I say like the Forbes thing, or in respect to Forbes, right? The reason why I say even raising capital in respect to my VCs and investors, those aren't my biggest accomplishments, is because like I expected to be here, right? So for me, when I think about it, my biggest accomplishment is being able to finally build with a team, like, and this is no disrespect to anybody I've ever worked with. It's just like, through and throughout, this team is amazing. Yeah. Right? Like doers, like folks from 7th Hire from Property Shark, engineering teams coming from Amazon and Bloomberg and Verizon, COO, background in cybersecurity and design, worked in government, customer success, 10-year manager. Like, it's just, there's so many things. Our VP of business sold a company, like, and these are, we're talking about almost split men and women, so diverse, right? Like,
It's back to the grind.
This is what I've dreamed about.
Back to the grind of like grinding to, first of all, identify your business, establish it, have it get some, credibility,
right?
To get some capital, right? Get some investors. And then once you got the investors, you're talking about not just once you got the investors, but the entire time.
Yeah.
Is also assembling your mastermind group, your team. That's really gonna, and folks come and they go, right?
Yeah.
Because you're also too poor to afford these guys.
Absolutely. Right? Absolutely. That's the real thing, right? And
yeah.
What does it look like if you can't inspire people to work for less than what they can make on the market? You're not going to succeed as a founder.
Wow. That is his biggest accomplishment, folks. Now, I've got a major question to ask you. I've got this little part of our show here. Well, I pull out this little crystal box here, and what's in the box is a bunch of cards. Señores, yo nunca sé lo que tiene aquí de pregunta, pero ya usted sabe que él se siente bien orgulloso de lo que ha podido hacer, crear su equipo, pero esta cajita aquí le tiene una pregunta. This little box here has a question. And it's an innocent question, honestly. It's not going to be something like a truth or dare. Nothing too crazy. I haven't seen one yet. That is my disclaimer. But let's see what your question is so we can get to know you a little bit better. Oh, I like this one. Been around the world.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. If you could spend the weekend in any city, which would you choose? That is your question. It's right there, man.
All right. I fly by the hip a little bit, so I'm gonna go with the first city that popped into my mind when you asked that, and it was Tokyo.
Tokyo.
Yeah.
Wow, you're the second person.
Interesting.
Since I started this year to say Japan.
Yeah.
Tokyo. Why?
Fashion, energy. It's different, so I'd be learning. I've never been to Japan. One of my closest homies from Baltimore went to school at Temple together, actually, too. He speaks fluent Japanese, which was always dope, because shout out to Desmond, brother out of Baltimore.
All right,
Desmond
man.
Hickson.
Desmond, arigato.
Yes, sir. And so I think, Tokyo is just interesting. Like, I'd be learning. I nerd out about the idea of learning. So the idea of walking through a place that I'm like, it's completely foreign to me, but I know it's like cutting edge technology. I know the fashion is super forward. Like, that'd be fun.
Love it, man. Stay curious, my friend.
Always.
Absolutely. Señores, esto ha sido un programa impactante. This has been a great program having you on here. I feel like, honestly, we could have gone for a much longer time. This happens with so many of my guests. When the story starts getting good, I don't want to let go, but the time is ticking on the clock, and these guys are giving me an hour so far, so we got to do what we can. But I learned some stuff from you. Aprendí muchas cosas, y si ustedes están escuchando y tienen los niños escuchando, tal vez le están traduciendo a ustedes. Yo trato de hacer mi mejor trabajo, pero aprenden, señores. Es manteniendo la curiosidad, manteniendo la mente abierta y observando, no comparando, no dándosela de lo que usted esté mejor que lo que esté ahí afuera. It's really just being an observer of life, being a student your entire life. So I wish for you to continue taking that with you. You know, I wish for many more victories. I had some big takeaways here. You know, that observation was one of them. Learning and leading, right, was another, but leading to a unity.
Right.
Where you were connecting people all the time. I also saw that there was a lot of determination in what you were saying. Like, I know I'm supposed to be there. I know I'm supposed to get this happening. So it didn't deter you when there was the physical or the legal battles. And then I also noticed that you really just, by leading and unity, you really just the entire time are just trying to put people together.
Yeah.
And living your dream of having the right team on your side is really what you've been wanting to go for.
Absolutely.
So I think, folks, we should all strive to something like that. I think this has been amazing. Any last words, Ofo?
I mean, I'm just going to double down on what you said. I think, persistence is key, but the only way you can be persistent is if you're constantly opening up yourself to learn, right? Learn how to be nimble, learn how to achieve when you didn't achieve before, fail forward. Like there's no such thing as loss, right? It's how can you learn? So that's what I leave the audience with. And also check out wyl.co.
There you go.
Add your reviews.
I love it.
If you're an owner or operator out there, reach out to us.
Yes.
ofo@wyl.co. I'm always looking to bring on more amazing people.
Nice. Love it. Got to plug it in there. There you go. WYL. Señores, gracias por escuchar en este programa. I wish you plenty of more victory, plenty of more successes, plenty more accomplishments. I think it's definitely a gap there that hasn't been addressed. And like you said, we're still referring things as in dark ages, right? We are people, and we're all connected. We're all neighbors. So it's absolutely awesome that you're on this show. So many, many more days of triumph and victory for you. Señores, ya ustedes saben, cada sábado aquí a las 11 nos encontramos. Lo voy a ver ustedes en el vecindario, and I'll be seeing you back in the neighborhood. Enjoy this jam, victory, and I'm going back to Puff Daddy. Let's go.